Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, February 23rd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 191 days. The game against Michigan in 275 days. I'm sure you're all sitting at home sort of wishing that time away, wishing college football would get here just a little bit sooner. But friends, would you believe that there are people in charge of the sport who are wishing the games away faster? I know, it's sacrilege. I am as offended as you are, possibly more. But we are going to be talking about some proposed NCAA rule changes today, things that they're sort of batting around as possible ways to shorten the games up, tighten things up a little bit, and maybe get you in and out of the stadium a little faster and on to whatever you're doing after the game. So let's talk to Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com about that and many more things. Tony is my go-to outrage reporter. Anytime I'm really angry about something, I'm like, I'm going to have Tony on to talk about this. This is ridiculous, Tony. How stupid is this? Is it, first of all, is it a problem that college football games are going this long? You pulled up numbers on some of the Fox games, the Fox Big Noon games. These are nationally televised games, and everyone's out 4-hour games. We can't have 4-hour games. How many of the Fox Big Noon games last year were 4-hour games?
In fact, none of them were, and none of the CBS 3:30 kicks were 4-hour games. Interestingly, though, and I don't know why this was, 3 of the 10 ESPN2 noon windows went 4 hours, and I don't know how many of those were overtimes. I didn't check it that bad, but because I wanted to see, like, obviously we know everybody complains about how long the Fox games are and how long the CBS games are, and so I was like, well, let's just go see, because that ESPN2 game, it seems like they start that like right at noon. And they've got tight windows, and like the first 2 games were like 4 hours. I'm like, what in the world? What is going on at this noon window? But yeah, it feels like people need something to complain about. Now, I would agree. We don't. I have no problem with a 4-hour game if there's 4 hours of action. When it's not 4 hours of action, that's when you get a little bummed out, and that's, talking about the commercials and all that. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But I don't mind 3.5-hour games. I don't mind 3 hours and 45 minutes of games. I think if we just started the games on time, instead of, what time does that 3:30 game start? It starts at 3:45. What time does the 7 o'clock game start? It starts at 7:15. Like, if we just start at 3:30 on the dot, start at noon on the dot, you wouldn't be bleeding into other games either, necessarily.
Well, I think you're kind of indirectly hitting on one of the actual solutions to the problem, because there are a lot of proposed solutions here that don't address the actual problem. If you've sat in the stadium during these games and felt, boy, this game is going too long, you're not thinking that while the game action is happening. You're thinking that while you're sitting there watching, you're not even thinking that when the knocker ball thing's going on. But there are a lot of TV commercial breaks where they're not doing the knocker balls on the field. And that's when you're thinking it. It's when they're talking about, they're selling stuff on the scoreboard, and also they're selling pickup trucks on Fox or ABC or whoever's airing the game at that point. The reason the game starts, that the noon game starts at 12:10 or 12:15 or whatever time it starts, is, well, they want to have the pregame show, and they want to talk about things a little bit, and then they want to have a commercial break when they know everyone's watching, and then they want to talk about stuff some more. And then they want to have another commercial break, and then they're going to kick it off. Well, what if you just did away with all that stuff? And the answer is, well, then you'd have fewer commercials, and they would give you less money for the TV rights. So that's the actual solution, and why why they won't, why that's not actually being one of the proposed solutions, because TV is giving them all the money. TV is the actual issue here, but they have decided that maximizing their TV revenue is the most important thing. So therefore, the actual solution can't be presented as a solution. So I think there are, though, opportunities, though, Tony. You look at other sports. I think NASCAR does this, where they'll sort of squeeze back the screen and put the ad on the other side, just run a 30-second ad while you can see the other thing. Soccer will do that, where sports where there aren't a lot of natural commercial breaks. There are ways to get around this. They just haven't done it. It's going to take a little bit of innovation. It feels like that's a possibility. You could do some of that stuff where you don't have touchdown, commercial, kickoff, touchback, commercial, then the drive starts. Like a couple of those, getting rid of a couple of those would keep things flowing a little bit, I think, during the course of the game. in a much more meaningful way and probably have a much more positive impact than a lot of the other stuff they're talking about here.
Well, and with college football being the way that it is, in terms of there's some up tempo, so you can't maybe have an ad read when stuff like that is happening. However, like there is no up tempo during the special teams portion of a kick, a score, like when they go off to commercial or whatever. As you're getting ready for the kickoff, there's 30 seconds of just milling about that you can squeeze back and throw an ad in that you're not leaving the broadcast itself. And if you do leave if the kickoff is happening while you're squeezed to like a third or whatever, guess what? It's just going to be fair caught. It's just going to be a touchback. You're not missing anything with a kickoff. So there are things like that I agree. You can have the game going while you're also showing ads, and you do enough of those and you'll squeeze a couple of minutes, compress it a little bit. And I think that's it's not a solution. It's just, and again, the idea of like, well, not one thing doesn't solve everything. It's like, we're trying to piece some things together to make things better or shorter, not trying to solve things with just one item. You're just trying to, what can we do to make this more palatable for the people complaining about it, or for the TV networks, so that they can still get their minutes in, but also it's a better viewing product, especially, I almost said especially for the people in the stands, but TV doesn't care about those people.
No, TV definitely does not care about those people. TV, in fact, wants no people in the stands, because then there's more people home to watch TV. So there's a fun little secret for you. But you're not talking about stuff that's going to save 15 minutes. If they do just the squeeze back ads or whatever between kickoff or touchdown and kickoff or whatever it is. But there are a lot of these proposed solutions are not going to save 70 an hour and a half either. One of them is prohibiting consecutive timeouts. So like if you're lining up to ice the kicker, they're lining up for a game-winning field goal or the end of the half field goal, and you're icing the kicker, you're going to call multiple timeouts. They're considering doing away with that. You can't call multiple timeouts, consecutive timeouts, to ice the kicker. Okay, how often does that happen, and how much time does that actually save by preventing it? Because you're only going to have a TV timeout maybe once on that, and the second one's like a 30-second timeout. Okay, congratulations, you just saved 30 seconds. Great job, everyone. No untimed down at the end of the first quarter and third quarter. Again, how often does that happen, and it saves you one play? Now, those two things are both things that if they added those rules, I would have really no issue with that, because you're not materially impacting the game in any way. No more consecutive timeouts and no more untimed down at the end of the first quarter and third quarter. I feel like outside of LOL, they just iced the kicker 3 times and he still hit the field goal kind of thing, I don't know that you even notice if either of those two things were gone.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't. And it is noticeable when it's happening, because you're like, and that's everybody's response is like, and I would do away with all icing of kickers, no timeouts before any kicks.
That's I feel like that you'll end up with a lot of procedural penalties, which will end up or a little like horrendously shanked kicks, or either 13 or 7 guys on the field. It'll turn every kick into a circus. So
I didn't mean that for Ohio State.
Well, I was speaking more broadly in the sport of college football, okay. But yes, it is. We all love our hashtag college kickers, so that's could lead to a little bit of additional entertainment or amusement. A couple other things that are really just shortening the game and giving you less football in the same. Well, we can't take away the commercials. That's what you're all here for. Let's take away from the football instead. One of the proposals is the clock runs after first downs, except after 2 minutes and a half. And this is one of these things where, again, it's not going to make a huge difference most of the time, because if you're, the last 2 minutes of the half, that's when that rule really comes into effect. It's going to maybe make it a little harder to have a dramatic comeback in the fourth quarter. Okay, that you're going to hurt people's ability to have a big comeback later in the game, so that's not great. It just functionally, is going to shave 5 plays off of every game, something like that. I mean, it's just a little bit less football, and it's not going to have a huge impact, but the impact it's going to have is going to be maybe a little bit negative.
Yeah, and right now the current rule is The clock stops after a first down, but then it starts back up again once the ball is ready for play. So, it does eventually move, but I like this difference between college and the NFL. I like the clock stopping for a bit after a first down, just because it creates some difference and it creates more opportunities for comebacks. But if it goes away, and I think people have said it would take away like 7 to 9 plays per game, something like that. If it goes away, you're going to have more up tempo, people trying to get those snaps back, and because part of this is also the safety of the game, wanting to limit what they call exposures and contact plays and things like that, because they are going to be asking players to play more games now. So if you take away 7 to 9 plays over the course of a season, that's almost like, an entire game's worth of action. But coaches are always looking to get those plays back, and let's speed it up even more. And Tom, is up tempo, is that what we want football to be?
No, 2013 Nick Saban, it's not. Yeah, I mean, that feels like that's the direction the game is going anyway. You have many fewer, slow it down, grind it out kind of teams than you used to. That's just sort of the direction football has gone. So it does feel like that's, if you are the favorite, you want to have more plays because you want to take, press your advantage as much as you can. Because every play, if you have a slight advantage, the more plays you have, the more that slight advantage adds up over time. So, if you were an Ohio State fan, you should want more plays. If you were a Bowling Green fan playing a mid-level Big Ten team, you want as few plays as possible. This is the, run the clocks, string things out as much as you can, drag the game out. This is this is why the service academies are able to give teams like Oklahoma, for example, a really tough time, because you shrink the number of opportunities they have with the ball. And that gives them fewer opportunities to score against you, and you reduce the variance in possible outcomes is sort of the mathematical explanation for that. But all you need to know is more plays, better for better teams, fewer plays, better for, underdog kind of teams.
How did you feel about the 2006 clock change when the clock started with the kickoff and just kept going? Because I absolutely hated that rule.
Yeah, I didn't really, how much did that change things? It feels like that probably made about as much change as, some of the stuff we're talking about here, so. Yeah,
it was about 7 to 9 plays.
Yeah, about 7 to 9 plays. Yeah, I am in favor of more football. That is my strongly held opinion, is more football would be great. And if you want to limit the number of exposures, you could get rid of, one of the non-conference games and play, and just continue to provide the same amount of football product, and then have a week less of game prep and a week less of in-game exposures. But that would involve a week less of ticket revenue and a week less of TV revenue. So that obviously is completely impractical. The last thing, speaking of completely impractical, the last proposed change was the clock runs on incompletions once the ball is spotted. So essentially, it would be changing the incompletions to how first downs are right now. So you throw the ball, it's incomplete, they spot it, and then they run the clock. And, you have teams who are, you throw the ball a lot, you throw the ball 40 times, and you have 12 incompletions, 15 incompletions. That's really going to add up over time as well, because then you can run another 20 seconds off the clock if you want to on those. It would be interesting, because it would really change the decision making on, late in the game, we're trying to run out the clock, but it's 3rd and 6. Do we want to run the ball and just keep the clock moving, or do we want to risk having an incompletion? Well, that changes your decision-making tree a little bit there. If you know that an incompletion is going to stop the clock, but it's only going to stop the clock for 8 seconds or 10 seconds or however long it takes to spot the ball, and then they're going to run the clock again. So, that would be sort of an interesting change strategically, but it feels like this one maybe impacts the clock, impacts the potential number of plays more than anything else we've talked about here.
Yeah, and not only that, it impacts coaching decisions. And of all of my years of watching football and covering it, coaches don't necessarily want to have a bunch of decisions to have to make. Like when the NFL was thinking about going back to the 2-point conversion, there were so many people against it because the head coach didn't want to be responsible for another decision. This changes the way they've been coaching forever. And so I think if they have any say in this, they're going to be like, no, I don't want this new rule that forces me to rethink how I've done everything and forces me to reevaluate the end of game situations, which are the most important of the game. Like I don't want to have to learn new tricks in that regard and maybe make some mistakes because all of the analytics aren't fleshed out on what you should actually be doing in this situation. So I would assume most coaches would be completely against this just because it changes what you've done for so long.
Yeah, that's it. The NFL 2-point conversion thing is a great comparison. And the fact that coaches, you're right, I think that coaches are going to be against it. I think you're right about why coaches are going to be against it. And it feels like this might be one of those things that this is such a dramatic change that maybe you throw this out there and then it's like, well, we didn't do that one because that would have been too much. So we're going to compromise and only do the first 3. And then, oh, look, how benevolent of us to not take away all of your football, merely taking away some of your football. Yeah, we'll see how this all shakes out. This has to go through the whole NCAA rules process. And this is all just a proposal right now. But when this kind of stuff gets floated, it's usually going to go somewhere. And the question is just how far it's going to go. So we'll see how far it goes, but it will, it's something that could be changing the way you're watching football as soon as this fall, potentially, I believe. So it is definitely a not necessarily a welcome change, I would say.
I think one last thing that, and a lot of that we're getting this from is the Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated writing this article. And the last thing that he writes, and I'm not sure if you've seen it because it's after an ad, the final sentence is, the final 2 sentences are, television commercials don't impact game time significantly. From 2018 to 2020, games not televised finish only about 2 minutes sooner than those televised. Now, the idea that commercials don't impact the length of games is impossible to me because there's so many breaks. And so what games at this point aren't televised? Because most games are. And so the average game time this last year was 3 hours and 21 minutes. And those are the televised games. And you've had so many games that are televised. I went through and looked like week 12, just a random week. ESPN Plus, the games that nobody watches, they had like 52 in 1 week. And so they're not running nearly as many ads as the CBS 330 or the Fox game because those games are longer than the average. Fox and CBS were 3 hours and 29 minutes compared to the 3 hour and 21 average. So like the games that we watch are longer because of the commercials. So the idea that commercials don't impact this, because I know as people are listening and watching this, they're like commercials, get rid of the commercials. And you have this last line, this thought that commercials don't really impact it. It's crazy.
Well, and here's another thing. The games that are not on TV, wherever those games are on the radio somewhere. They don't call it TV timeout. They call it a media timeout. And it's not for the newspapers. It's not for the websites. It's for the radio and the TV. So yeah, they are also selling you stuff on the radio. And those are, those 2:30 breaks take just as long as the 2:30 breaks for TV. So yeah, it is. That seems a little, that seems like one of those things that doesn't quite check out because, if you take away a 2.5 minute break, I don't think the game is just artificially going to continue stretching longer just to meet some artificial, well, we don't get to punch out until 4:13, so we're going to keep playing until 4:13. That doesn't sound right to me. So yeah, don't worry. TV commercials aren't going anywhere. Lucky you. You get to learn more about Rotel this fall, or whatever they're advertising on Big Ten Network now. So should be whatever it is. We'll be there to cover it at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Not the Rotel, the football. Maybe the Rotel too. I don't know. We'll see. But lots of Buckeye coverage. Very few TV timeouts on any of those. So Make sure you join us there at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony and Kevin and I covering the team. Mark and Alex covering the recruiting. Fantastic team of insiders covering all of the scheme and X's and O's and all that kind of fun stuff, making you a smarter football fan, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.